was formerly a politician, but I'm here primarily in my capacity as one of the founders and ex-chairman of the Jersey Lifeboat Association.
Thank you, Mr. Shenton. So just to say, this is obviously a public hearing. There'll be a transcript produced. We're covered by parliamentary privilege here, so I think you know how that works as a former States member. So let's get into it. So we've obviously called in this proposed law and amendments that are being proposed around inshore maritime safety, and we were very grateful for your submission that you sent us in regard to that new law. I suppose, first of all, can I just ask you for a bit of your background and your interest in this area?
Okay, so basically I'm not a maritime person. I've never owned a boat in my life, but I was president of the chairman of the Jersey Lifeboat Association. Back in, I think it was November 2021, the Max Aiken, which was our lifeboat, hit the rocks off Normal Point and limped back into St Helier under the skillful care of our coxswain. And fortunately, no one was injured, and the boat was very badly damaged, and it did cost quite a bit of money to repair it. The coxswain obviously notified me of the incident, and the following morning the harbour master phoned me to say that the incident had happened, and said that the coxswain had declined the breathalyser. So obviously I hit the roof because, you know, if after an accident, if you're the coxswain of a lifeboat, that's the last thing you do. So I phoned up the coxswain and got a very different story. Basically, he had been met at the point by Ports of Jersey, and in my submission, the actual wording is there because it was a statement made in the investigation. But it was along the lines of, I've got no legal duty to ask you this, but you might want to take a breathalyser. However, we don't have any breathalyzers, but I could phone the police and they might turn up, but they might not. So what do you want to do? And basically the coxswain, who had just been out on duty, brought the boat back. It was late at night. He was soaking wet and freezing cold, said, well, I'll go home. Unfortunately, someone leaked it to the press that he'd refused a breathalyser, and that was the front page news on the thing. I mean, and all the way through, alcohol wasn't actually a point in this incident, but it made me realise that there was something seriously amiss here, because we had a difficult relationship with Ports of Jersey, and we weren't able to register the lifeboat as a lifeboat. They wouldn't let us, because with a lifeboat you self-certify. So they made us register the lifeboat under the Commercial Boat Code. So we were subject to the Commercial Boat Code, which is passenger carrying. So the very similar code, although it might be slightly technically different to, say, the Condor ferry or something like that, or a boat that goes to France carrying passengers. So here we were, we'd had an accident. Me, as someone from the finance industry that expects proper governance, and the coxswain, after the accident, where people could have been injured or hurt, was sort of told, oh, do you want a breathalyser? But we don't have any. And the police may not turn up. Now, this was 8 months before the Condor boat hit the fishing boat.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Now, I know the court case is going on now, but I don't think the jury's going to be listening to this submission. But I would think that because of the lack of proper legislation, we will never know whether the people on the Condor boat that hit the fishing boat were under the influence of alcohol or not. Because there were no powers, and there are no powers, to actually breathalyse them and make sure they weren't.
Okay. Thank you. I will move us away from that because I'm slightly uneasy, as you mentioned, that there's a live case, but we've got your submission. And I suppose to turn to the question about whether or not this law is needed. I suppose if the ports of Jersey were here and they have been to us, they'd say it's exactly because they don't have any powers at the moment to compel a breath test.
Well, that may be because I wrote to them several years ago to say that I wrote to the Chief of Police and the Council of Ministers to say that this was basically ridiculous and unprofessional, that there were no powers in place. And what we're seeing with the legislation coming in is just how void the whole thing was with regard to the actual breathalyzing. Now, they made the argument that, well, we don't have actually that many people that go out on boats that are over the alcohol limit.
Yeah.
But they don't actually test anyone.
Yes, yes.
Now, which so it's nonsensical, because if you said, right, I want to cut down on speeding in Jersey, so what we're going to do is we're not going to actually monitor anyone speeding, and therefore we'll have no one convicted of speeding, and we'll have solved the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't make sense. If you're not testing people, and I know the chap who lost a leg in a jet ski accident, if you're not testing people and there's nothing in place, and there's nothing in place when an accident happens, then the government is actually negligent in its duties.
So let's maybe turn to the question of alcohol policy. That's one of the areas that's certainly been of interest to us. Where do you think the balance lies in terms of a policy that either addresses alcohol, that what the law is proposing is that it addresses the use of alcohol retrospectively and in an aggravated way. So alcohol consumption only becomes a problem and an offence if you've done something else wrong, i.e. dangerous sailing, should we call it, or you've hit somebody, possibly killed someone, then that could be, you can be breathalyzed in that circumstance. But routinely, there's nothing to stop people drinking and sailing. Is that where do you think the balance lies?
Well, I think there should be random breathalyzing.
And is that just for commercial and duty bound?
Well, it depends on how far we want to go as a jurisdiction. There is a difference between those operating a boat professionally and those out just on the sea having a gin and tonic and a little cruise around. And obviously the law is much more stringent on those operating professionally. But it was rather interesting that with the new law, they're bringing in the road alcohol limits and not the maritime alcohol limits. And they didn't explain in the legislation as to why they weren't being consistent, because the maritime alcohol limits were actually lower than the road alcohol limits.
Yeah.
And you would expect that, because that actually makes a lot of sense, because me driving my car on my own, I can injure myself if I drive over the limit. If I'm, running a Condor ferry or something like that, the level has to be much lower, almost to a zero alcohol level.
Yeah.
And then there's also other issues as well, which I've raised.
In your experience, have you been aware of cases where people have been under the influence of alcohol?
There's been loads of stories. I mean, there was a story of a commercial boat which got washed ashore on the west of the island, and the captain could hardly stand. He was so pissed. So.
Oh, okay.
So you've raised historically and also now, Ben, you concerns around what's being proposed, issues around governance, around maritime safety. Can you just explain to us where you see the issues and, where the focus around strengthening that safety and security around the waters needs to be sort of strengthened, if you like, it through these proposals that the government is putting together?
Well, I think prevention is better than... You don't actually want to start arresting people on their boats. So I think... But there doesn't seem to be much in the way of actual statements out there to say about, if you're using a boat, think about not... you have it for cars, don't drink and drive and this and that. But you should also have it for boats. There should be more of a campaign to say, which is like a carrot and stick approach. So you say to them, look, don't drink and drive. If you're going out, maybe have one gin and tonic, but don't drink the whole bottle, sort of thing. Because there might be if we see you coming in and we think we will breath test you. So you need to have a fear there as well, because at the moment they're not going to catch me unless I kill someone, or they're not going to catch me unless I crash into something or other.
So do you think that there is? I noticed in your submission that you talked about a zero tolerance approach to alcohol and drug use, but are you suggesting that in terms of being reasonable and proportionate, there should be appropriate limits as opposed to a total absence of alcohol?
I think there's two levels here. As I say, one as a just a bloke going out fishing or whatever, and someone with passengers and a commercial enterprise. So there should be two, and there is under UK law there is those two constraints, and obviously the constraints under the UK maritime law is much tighter than the constraints that we're looking to bring in over here. And I'm not sure whether that's going to cause a problem anyway, because if you're over the maritime limit but below the car limit, are you going to then end up with a court case as to,
So there's something about the consistency in terms of
so
the way
there needs
it's
to
being
be
applied.
consistency. There also is a problem with the fact that Ports of Jersey is a private company. So it's a bit like saying to secure a call, you monitor, drunk driving police and so on and so forth. So therefore you've got inherent conflicts there, because you've got, they've got customers that pay them a lot of money. Are they less likely to stop a customer that's paying them a lot of money than someone who maybe they've got who owes them money in the petty debts court or something like that? So, if they see their mate coming along, and then what about Ports of Jersey staff itself? So I think to be honest with you, if you bring this in, you need the things I spoke about in the paper I submitted yesterday, but you probably need also a zero tolerance with Ports of Jersey staff if you're going to give them the breathalyzers. And I noticed in today's paper that there's a big piece about how they brought the breathalyzers ahead of the legislation.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised that Ports of Jersey didn't raise about the difference in maritime alcohol limits.
I think we are aware of the different
Levels.
requirements for whether if you're duty bound, commercial, there are other protocols. I suppose just following on from that, if I may, Vice Chair, I just interrupt you. I don't know if you'd finished, but
I was just going to come on to the maritime investigation, but I'll come on to that later. Yeah.
Okay, I was just going to ask about the perceived conflict from your point of view. So something that's been raised with us separately as well, about whether or not Ports of Jersey are best placed to enforce, effectively police criminal laws. If it wasn't them, who do you think might do it?
Well, I mean, if you take a step back, there's a wealth of legislation governing those that currently enforce criminal laws. But this is a very light touch. You're almost giving someone the ability to criminalise something without having the proper appeals processes or anything else in place, or without managing the conflicts of interest. So, I mean, Ports of Jersey employ a lot of people. So, you've got to make sure that there's a proper complaints procedure. You've got to also make sure that they don't... How are you going to manage the bias that they may have towards their own staff? That they may find themselves. Ports of Jersey in itself is if I was a director of Ports of Jersey, the first thing I'd probably want to do is clarify what Ports of Jersey actually is. Under the law, Ports of Jersey is mandated to operate in the best interests of the island. Under ministerial delegation, it's delegated to operate as a commercial company to maximise profits. Those two things are not the same. They may sound the same, but they're not the same at all. And you have a board of directors at Ports of Jersey that haven't clarified that, and I just wonder how they can do their jobs.
And do you have any thoughts about the lines of demarcation between States of Jersey Police and Ports of Jersey in terms of enforcing the new maritime law?
Well, I mean, I don't know, have they signed them, the understanding, memorandum of understanding?
We're waiting for it.
So it's been drafted. We've seen a draft, which we would want it to be published. I think you've mentioned that as well. As I don't think it's been signed yet.
And how did it come about that the police weren't even involved in the actual drafting of this legislation? Do you know how that happened?
So I think we're trying to understand the relationship between States of Jersey Police and Ports of Jersey. So there is an overlap, and it would depend on the jurisdiction of where arrests are made. But yeah, essentially this is about Ports of Jersey will be the main enforcement body for what goes on in the water around Jersey.
Yes, with its inherent conflicts of interest. So you're basically putting that out to a private company.
I mean, they would argue, I suppose, that they're quite capable of separating their policing roles from their commercial roles. Would you accept that?
No, the harbour master and Ports of Jersey I put a complaint to the complaints panel, where they ruled that they basically held a vendetta against Jersey Lifeboat Association, and the complaints panel found in our favour. So the States Assembly offered the Jersey Lifeboat Association an apology. Ports of Jersey just took legal action and threatened to sue the complaints panel. This is a body that you think can act impartially. Well, my experience tells me that absolutely not.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, can I just follow up on that? I mean, I think what you've described is there are some ambiguities around roles and responsibilities in relation to not only conflict of interest, but also duties and responsibilities.
That's right, yes.
Can you just explain your views as to how that can actually be clarified and improved upon, please?
Well, at the moment we have what's known as the Harbour Authority, which is supposed to be independent from Ports of Jersey, and John Mills is the chair, and John Mills is obviously an ex-director of Ports of Jersey. Unfortunately, John sent me an email by mistake that was meant to be for the harbour master that demonstrated that there was no impartiality there, and that they were operating basically as part of Ports of Jersey. So you need to make sure that the Harbour Authority actually works, because it doesn't work at the moment. You also need to have a code of conduct for the harbour master to make sure that he doesn't overstep the line. And there's been numerous reports over the years criticising the performance of the harbour master. So this is something that's urgently needed. There needs to be a proper complaints process, a public complaints mechanism, because you've given it to a private company, so almost like an ombudsman. And I'm sitting here as someone that doesn't like red tape, and this is all to get around the fact that we're giving a commercial company. You could have, of course, just separate the harbour master functions from take it out of Ports of Jersey, and make Ports of Jersey a pure commercial operation, which would make a lot more sense. But whilst you want this sort of hybrid model where 1 minute the harbour master's on the news talking about the flats they're going to build and the money they're going to make, and the next minute he's going to be arresting people for drunk driving, being drunk on a boat. Yeah. Some of which might be tenants of the flats that they're going to build or whatever. It just the whole when you actually look at the way Ports of Jersey has been set up, it's got just so many questions, or more questions than answers, as the song would say. And do you see that the ambiguity has arisen as a consequence of it being a private company, and has that evolved over time, in the absence of any other sort of regulation or any other duties and responsibilities that perhaps maybe the police may have taken on, or how do you see that If I'm totally honest with you, there's two facts. Firstly, it is as a result of it being a private company. But secondly, I don't think the public generally understand what a backlog of legislation that Jersey has. I was walking down my lane. We've got lane next to the house, which we let the public use to get to the beach. And this bloke's walking down with a cup of coffee, and he said to me, he said, "Oh, we're just he's a transfer, he's a law draftsman, and he's working on a proposition that I brought to ban the importation of fur into the island." Okay. Which I'd forgotten about. Okay, so a black mark for me there, because it was around about 2006, 2007. And we're just doing the legislation now. And we're putting it into the new animal welfare law. Bit ironic, I ended up president of the JSPCA, and I'd bring in a bit of legislation. Because a lot of legislation, a lot of things you do as a politician is not because you fervently believe in it. And I think this is what the public don't understand. I was bringing that in because people approached me because they didn't want further importation. So I think, and so what we're trying to do is we're trying to play catch up. And because we're trying to play catch up, you get legislation like this, which is more tick box type. Let's get this legislation through. Let's perceive to the world that we're going to tighten up. Let's forget about all of the weaknesses of the legislation and the actual fine detail. Let's just get it through, and then we can tick that box and we can move on to another piece of legislation.
So do you not believe that the way in which the legislation is proposed, I think what you're telling us is that it's tight enough or strong enough to address those governance issues that you've just highlighted?
It's definitely not tight enough or strong enough to address the governance issues. But I know what happens. It'll come back to the chamber, and then promises will be made that they'll, through ministerial decision or something like that, oh, don't worry, we'll tighten up this or we'll tighten up that. And it'll never happen.
It seems as though that you'd have probably been more satisfied had the Minister with Ports of Jersey been working together to bring forward legislative amendments to some of the legislation to have a demarcation between the Harbour Master and then, of course, at the Ports of Jersey from a commercial perspective.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
And the lack of police input. You know, I mean, it seems incredible when you look back on it that the police weren't involved from day one.
No.
And then, of course, you're going to get the old argument, oh, you know, our police budget, we can't do this as well without a higher budget and all that sort of stuff.
And would you also be of the view as well that you need to ensure that there is an active deterrent, for instance, that there are enforcement officers who are doing checks when maybe boats are coming in and out of the harbour?
Absolutely. Just even if they do them very rarely, just the threat of a random check is enough. But to have no deterrent at all, it's almost, if someone's having his fourth gin and tonic, someone's saying to him, I said, oh, it's all right, I'll be fine as long as I don't hit anyone. Or I'll be fine as long as I don't hit anyone and ports find out about it, because he could be out at sea somewhere. Where's the random checks aspect? And I can't see, and they're sort of saying, oh, that's going to be too hard, Well...
In your submission, you talked about, just picking up the issues around conflict of interest, lack of governance. You propose a maritime regulator. Could you just talk to us about your thinking behind that?
Well, basically, it's a harbour authority that works. So we have the Harbour Authority that is a de facto maritime regulator, but really they're just in the pocket of Ports of Jersey, and they're not separate, and they're not a proper regulator, and they're there just to tick a box. So you'd have to make sure that the Harbour Authority worked, because the Harbour Authority under John Mills does not work.
Right. But in terms of when we're maybe looking at the personnel currently that are part of that, would you be more comfortable if it's serving members in future had no prior relationship with the ports of Jersey as a prerequisite to them joining?
I think it's rather strange the way that the ports chairman directed them then became the regulator. It'd be a bit like me, working in investment management and then running the JFFC. It's not something
No.
that should happen.
No.
Could I just come back to the regulator, Ben, please, in terms of the way in which you're suggesting its independence? How would you see it operating?
Well, basically, it would operate as an independent, so it would have an arm's length, rather than a cosy relationship with ports it currently has. It would have an arm's length, but you still have the actual problem in as much as the harbour master is paid by Ports of Jersey and gets a bonus paid by Ports of Jersey. Okay, and then he also has the power to arrest people who he thinks may be. And a lot of the people using the harbour will have a relationship, a commercial relationship with Ports of Jersey and with the harbour master. So I can't see how that works. It's a bit like, I don't know, saying to me, you work for an investment management firm, but we're going to make you the regulator, and you can find all the other investment management firms. And there's absolutely nothing here about Chinese walls or making sure that the whole thing is managed. And I think this is, I'll be honest with you, I think this is a knee-jerk reaction because subsequent to my complaint, we obviously had an accident where there wasn't the law in place. And I think what they're trying to do here is just do a knee-jerk reaction and get something in, even if it's not fit for purpose.
So you would be familiar with things like international standards around maritime safety, given your previous roles. What do you think that these proposals support or fall short of those international standards?
Well, I think there's a lack of consistency. I'm not sure why we're moving to a different level alcohol. The maritime limit is 25, 50, 67, and we're going for 35, 80, and then urine not specified. So that's, why not just go for the same thing? They've had a whole conversation about, what about drug limits and all this sort of stuff. And I was thinking about it coming in today, and I was sort of thinking, well, there's cigarettes, okay. Now, you're not going to smoke so many cigarettes that you can't handle a boat. So there's legal drugs, so legal medication, and then there's illegal medication. Now, some legal medication may make you drowsy or whatever, but then that's, you know that and you're warned of that. So why not, just make it illicit, illicit drugs, which is an offence in itself.
Yes, yeah. Do you think that in terms of having an independent regulator, it would operate to a different standard around the people's competence and capability around the need to do their regulatory job?
I think if you've got a harbour master that's employed by a commercial company, you need some form of regulation there, because you need some form of checks and balances, but also you need a way for the public to actually appeal to someone independent and say, well, actually, I was picked on, or I'm a victim, or this and the other.
In terms of their investigation powers, do you see any capability issues as things are now in terms of whether they're able to discharge their responsibilities?
Well, this is a big question, and for my sins, I've never volunteered for the honorary police, but one assumes that if they do arrest someone, then they have to be familiar with the actual procedures that you require to get someone up to the magistrates' court or the royal court. And again, I'd like to see a comment from the Attorney General as to their their opinion, because the Attorney General is actually responsible for the honorary police system, and this is sort of a little bit like, instead of giving it to an individual, you're giving it to a corporate. But yeah, what's the AG think of the way that we're moving forward on this?
Can I ask, one suggestion, or certainly one idea around this area is that, you know, other places, other harbour authorities, other countries, if you like, have the police doing maritime policing, so it's just a branch of the police. Would you think that's something Jersey could look at, or do you think it's desirable?
I think it would be a much better solution, because you have all the structure in place with the independence of the police and the complaints processes. I think that would be a lot better.
Because the police, that's what they do, that's their job, so they're not there to sell you anything or to...
No, and you're not. They're not interested in the fact you're the biggest payer of mooring fees, or you're the, there's a connection there.
You never hear the police talk about light touch policing. They just, I suppose, it's about policing correctly. So
yes, I mean, as you and
maybe they
I
do talk
know,
about that.
police is
Proportional, isn't it? It's proportional.
yes, but it is arm's length. I mean, when I was in politics, a number of times I had my wrist slapped for stepping on their toes. Was quite often actually, but they are arm's length and independent. I'm not. Yeah, Ports of Jersey isn't arm's length and isn't independent.
Yeah.
I mean, going back to Ports of Jersey, for example, I mean, one of my bugbears is the fact that when you go back to the Freedom of Information Law, Ports of Jersey fulfills all the criteria required to be under the Freedom of Information Law. But legally, they should be under the Freedom of Information Law. But it's just that not the politicians, the civil servants decided that they wouldn't be. Because if you read the Freedom of Information Law, they were independent, set up by proposition, and they're actually 100% spot on what should be freedom of. But you have no freedom of information with Ports of Jersey. It's like getting blood out of a stone.
So are you suggesting that there are gaps in the legal duties of Ports of Jersey, and that they're covered by a different kind of governance, which is more corporate governance rather than the law?
Well, the whole thing is a muddle. I'm preparing a report at the moment which isn't going to be published because it's so boring, to do with the deconsolidation of the accounts, and Ports of Jersey are looking to deconsolidate their accounts, as is SOJDC and Angium. And if you're normally, I don't know if you know who Arthur Daly was, a minder. Normally, if you're a bit of a dodgy businessman and you want to hide your debt, what you do is you deconsolidate your subsidiaries so that it takes all the debt out of your main accounts. And they want to deconsolidate because all three are going to end up with quite a lot of high debt levels. And if they deconsolidate it won't show as part of States of Jersey's debt. But to deconsolidate, you've got to be 100% independent of your parent company. And of course, Ports of Jersey is structured to undertake numerous international obligations under law. And this is going to be yet another one, the power to arrest. So how can you argue that someone with the power to arrest is completely independent of the state? So on one hand, they're arguing Ports of Jersey is standalone, independent, nothing to do with us. And then you're bringing in laws that give them the power to arrest. So I disagree with the CNAG on this one, because I think the CNAG is just using UK accounting standards. The thing about accounting standards is you can pick and choose which one you want to operate to. But it is a useful way of reducing your debt burden. If you start putting your government buildings in the Social Security Fund and getting all the Ports of Jersey debt off your balance sheet and everything else, you can turn around and say, well, we've got low debt levels, when in fact you're creaking.
If there were to be an independent regulator, you would suggest that needs to be established.
It needs to be established. John Mills needs to step down as because he's too conflicted. I mean, not only that, he's chair of the Charity Commission. So when we had complaints as a charity under the Jersey Lifeboat Association, he was hopelessly conflicted because we were complaining to the person we were complaining about.
Yeah. Okay.
So, okay. We take.
Thank you.
Can I ask about maybe some points that we might be on agreement with, or you might agree with the legislation? So, if we go back to the law, the law effectively creates a series of new offences. So things like dangerous operation of a ship, careless operation of a ship, but also causing injury by careless operation and causing injury by dangerous operation of a ship, etc. There are some others that relate to excessive emissions, but those, I suppose, are the main ones. Do you think that, as a starting point, that is correct and legitimate aim to seek to do?
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure as to how detailed they needed to go. Because do they include what was surfboards used to paddle boards?
Vehicles.
Yeah, so there's one of the questions is that I suppose there was a previous law, P4, which was brought in earlier in the year, which, and I suppose we could ask you about that. So the definition of a ship is quite broad, of course. Do you have any thoughts about
it needs to be. Yeah.
So you think that could be an area where there's more definition given as to differentiating between, say, a paddleboard and a 50-foot commercial boat?
Well, you've got definitions under whether a commercial boat operates differently to a recreational boat. I'd have less definition. I'd just have a whole all-encompassing thing. The trouble with if you try and define something, you run the risk you're going to miss something out.
Do you have any thoughts about what one might think of being the retrospective nature of some of these offences? So if we take the alcohol issue for leisure users, so if you can drink 5 pints of beer, go out in your speedboat, and that's legally okay to do, might be questionable from a moral point of view, and that doesn't become a problem unless you've then you're operating your vessel dangerously or carelessly, perhaps driving erratically, or you hit someone. Do you think that's the right balance in there?
No, absolutely not. No, I think there should be an alcohol limit for recreational, and all the yachtsmen will hate me for saying that. But
do you think
you need a limit because it is dangerous to operate a motorboat or a jet ski or whatever.
Where would you set the limit, do you think?
I don't see any difference. I think in this case, I think with commercial vessels, it should be the maritime alcohol limit, which is lower, but with recreational, maybe the road limit. There was a jet ski outside my house the other day, too close inland and going at quite a speed. Now I've no idea whether he was drunk or not, but we get a lot of swimmers outside the house, and it was just for the grace of God that no one was injured.
Yeah. One of the arguments that the minister and the harbour master, I think, push back against is that would be criminalising potentially, a paddleboarder is treated the same as a jet skier, who's treated the same as a speedboat operator, and it might not be reasonable to. But of course, at the moment, it's only if they're operating dangerously or carelessly that they'd step in.
And I think there's proportionality. I mean, if someone's in a kayak, the chances of them actually injuring someone is not particularly high, whereas someone on a jet ski can actually kill.
So it might be policed in a similar way to the roads, where they're not routinely stopping cyclists, but unless there's something obvious in there.
Yeah, I mean, they could just use their common sense, but I don't know whether that's...
We'll ask them to write that into the law.
You have to explain what it is first.
And if I just turn to maybe the question about how this law is potentially going to affect Jersey's rescue organisations. I'm thinking of the RNLI, the JLA, but also other water-based charities. Do you think they need to be aware, or they might have things to say about this new law?
I think in the submission, I mean, obviously, if you're, I'm pretty sure that, I don't know, someone will probably come back and say I'm wrong here, but I'm pretty sure the R&I doesn't actually have a no alcohol thing, and nor did the JLA, because it's volunteers and you're calling them out and to give up their time, and if you've had half a glass of Chardonnay, it's not going to make much difference to you. So there's no alcohol limit, but obviously the guideline is very much
Yeah.
And are there any additional offences or enforcement powers that you would perhaps recommend or want to see included here?
No, and the reason I'd say no is because you're giving it to the harbour master and a private company, which I'm completely uncomfortable with.
But if it wasn't, then if it just in a
if it was a police, I think you'd probably just have to tie it up and see how it ties up with other legislation. But the police may well push back. I mean, I thought it was pretty bad that ports under the incident I spoke about earlier, that ports say the police might not even turn up, which doesn't say an awful lot for the police.
Do you have a view, Ben, around where that threshold for where the harbour master fulfills, his responsibilities and the police would take up theirs? Do you have an idea as to where the line is around that?
No, it's the commerciality of the aspect of it, and the conflicts, and that's how you manage the conflicts.
Yeah.
And the easiest way to manage the conflicts would be to pull the harbour master out of ports of Jersey.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Max, have you got any questions?
No, not at the moment, no.
Mr. Shenton, I think you've answered our questions very well, and I think we're at the point where we don't necessarily have anything else to ask you. Are there any points that you'd like to convey to us?
No, not really. As I said, I thank you for picking this up. It's a very important issue, and the law does need certainly looking at. I sent you some submissions yesterday, which you're quite happy for you to put on your website or do whatever you want with. As someone that's never owned a boat in his life, I never thought I'd end up becoming a bit of an expert on the maritime law, but that was... never thought I'd be running a lifeboat charity either, but there you go.
Thank you. Well, we appreciate your submission and
Very much,
taking the time